Hey, good evening, everyone. Welcome. This week I went down a rabbit hole, and again, that expression really, every letter in the Torah is a potential rabbit hole, because the Torah is infinite. So Rabbi Akiva used to be Dorish Tilim Shal Halachos. He would Dorish mountains of halachos from the little crowns on top of the letters. So it's all there, and it's amazing how as you narrow your scope, trying to pick something defined to speak about, if you look at it more, it simply grows and grows. So a little introduction before we get to the rabbit hole, and that's in how we deal with all these Parshas of the formation of Am Yisrael, especially here where Yaakov Avinu is forming that critical mass of Am Yisrael of 12 Shvatim. If we notice, and the Kuzari describes this as a process of divine selection, that after Avram Avinu had 2 children, Yitzchak was the one who carried on the potential and the mission that Avram Avinu had. From Yitzchak, it says, Ki bi Yitzchak yikare l'chazara. So Yaakov was chosen. Yaakov here has 12 children, none of whom are moved to the sidelines. It's what Chazal call mitato shlema, that his bed was whole. He formed this nation of 12 tribes. The 12 isn't random. 12 is a number that we find in many, many basic things. The 12 months of the year. There's a construct, and I'm very bad at geometry, called the Yud Beis Kavei Alachson, the 12 lines of the diagonal. Basically, I think if you have a 3-dimensional cube and you have a dot in the middle, and then you draw lines to all the corners to get 12 lines, something like that. It's something like that. Okay, it's the Maharal speaks about it. It's the idea of something which is 1 spreading out to its max, that spreads out to 12. The combination of that initial point 1 plus the 12 is 13, which is Echad. So that's what's being formed here, this structure of Am Yisrael. Now, one of my Rebbeim once gave me a very important opening to how to treat these Parshas with respect, because when we start to get into Yaakov and his different wives, and what seems to be squabbles about which wife is going to have more children, this strange reality show baby competition that's going on with Yaakov and Leah and Rachel and Bilhah and Zilpah. So he said the key to approaching it properly is the strange phrase that Yaakov brings to his father-in-law after he's worked his time to be able to marry Rachel, who he wanted to marry. And he says to his father-in-law, he says, Hava es ishti ki mal'u yamai va'avo eleha. Bring my wife, because I fulfilled my days of work, so that I can have relations with her. Rashi jumps on this. He says, Halo kal shebekalim eno medaber ken. The most lightheaded, coarse person does not go over at the end of the wedding to his father-in-law, Hava es ishti, bring my wife, v'avo eleh. Elo, lahamid Shvatim niskavim. His kavana was, the time has come to bring the Shvatim forth. My destiny is to build this nation. If you look at the word Hava, Hava has the gematria of 12. It's time to bring out the 12 Shvatim. This was the mission of Yaakov Avinu. That's what he was focused on. And in fact, that's what Lavan knew Yaakov was trying to do. And that was where Lavan's enmity was really sensed. I mentioned the other week that when you read the Pshat and the Psukim, Uncle Lavan doesn't seem like such a bad guy. He doesn't. And what we describe in the Haggadah as Arami Ovei David, the Aramean that wanted to destroy my forefather Yaakov. So they say that the key phrase of that destruction is at the end of this parsha, when he catches up to Yaakov and he tells him, Ha-banim banai v'abanot benotai. Your children are mine. Your daughters are mine. Meaning their struggle was over this continuation of Am Yisrael, of this eternal structure that was formed. Lavan wanted it to be his. He wanted to be under his influence. And the escape of Yaakov and that family after the formation of the 12 was a tremendous escape that had to be made from love and what he wanted there. Okay, so we realize now that that's what we're dealing with. A very serious type of thing. It's not a soap opera. It's not a squabble. And then we come to the Shevet that became my rabbit hole this week. That's the Shevet of Naftali. Okay, now, Naftali comes in after Leah has had 4 children, and Rachel has prayed and even beseeched her husband with that very painful phrase. She said, Hava li banim, again, that word Hava with the gematria of 12. Vim ayin mesa anochi. If you don't, I'm dead. Now, here I saw the explanation that this is not just an expression of pain in the maternal instinct. There's a very strange chazal that tells us Yaakov Avinu lo mes. Yaakov Avinu didn't die. The Gemara asks the obvious question, says in the Torah they buried him. So what happened? So the answer in the Gemara, Mazar o b'chaim, afhu b'chaim. Just as his children are alive, he is alive. Meaning, as long as that family that he set into motion is alive, he is alive. He lives throughout. Rachel Imenu so much wanted to be part of that process, and therefore to live on and to continue on with that. That's why she said, if not, Mesa Anochi. Rachel gives Yaakov her maidservant Bilhah. It's interesting, the Mefarshim say that she was freed already before she was given to Rachel. Okay, she was a free woman who yet went on helping. And she had one son named Dan. Okay, now, a question you can research and try to do. I saw one answer, it didn't satisfy me so much, didn't even satisfy the person who gave the answer, is why the tremendous name of Naphtali, which we're going to see in a second, wasn't given to that first child, Dan. Okay, we'll leave that aside for a second. The second child that comes from Bilhah is Naphtali. And here, Rachel Imenu explains his name. Right, it's very interesting here with the mothers giving the names also, right, which is what happens here. So Rachel Imenu says, Naftulei Elokim niftalti im achoti v'yacholti. I struggled the struggles of God with my sister and I succeeded. Okay, English translations are very, very limited. And the very poor translations of this idea of struggling with my sister gives us this picture of a wrestling match of Rachel versus Leah. Somehow that she was going, you're not going to have all the kids. I'm going to get some of these kids somehow. It's going to be through my maidservant. Ha, I won. She had a baby. It doesn't seem to make sense. It doesn't seem appropriate. And when you look in the Mefarshim, when you look in the Perushim which are there, Rav Hirsch points this out especially, she says, Naftulei Elokim niftalti. That means I was struggling divine struggles here. This was not a struggle against my sister Leah. This was a struggle to beseech HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to open up a window for me to be able to contribute and to have part of the construction of this nation, imachoti, with my sister. Not against my sister, with my sister. Rachel Imenu could have walked away with the whole thing, if we remember, that she could have let Yaakov Avinu know that Lavan was slipping in Leah instead, and she refused to do so, because it would embarrass Leah. So she stepped aside for Leah to marry Yaakov, and that's the source of the power of Rachel's prayers. The Medrash tells us that receives the answer, Bishvilech Rachel, because of you, Rachel, v'shavu banim l'gvulam, that Am Yisrael will return after the Golus. And that means she did it with a good heart. She did it willingly. And here too, when she says, Naftulei Elokim niftalti v'gam yocholti, that's an expression of simcha, of happiness. I'm happy that by giving my maidservant Bilhah to my husband and bringing forth these children, I am happy that I have a portion in what's going on here. I have a portion in this nation. So this is this is Rachel. There are many other explanations of it. The Malbim says Niftalti is an idea of something which is covered over, meaning I don't understand why Hashem didn't give me my own children. I don't know why that was. But Gam Yocholti, I overcame that challenge. And I found a way to help bring children to the family of Yaakov in another way, even as Hashem didn't open that for me. The Ramban, not in his Perush here, but in his Sefer he wrote, Emunah Bitochon, he says that Naftali is called by this name of Naftule Elokim Niftalti. These struggles, he means it's a lashon of chibur, of connection. I connected to this tremendous destiny of Am Yisrael. I connected with my tefillos to Hashem, and I connected with my sister, who's my partner in this endeavor, not my enemy. So this midah that Rachel Imenu evidences here very much affects the heritage of the Shevet of Naftali. The Talmud Rebbe says that the only way someone can do something like this with happiness is with the midah of what's called ayin tova, the good eye. Okay, let's take a second just to explain this concept. People hear often the expression of ayin ra'ah or ayin hara, the evil eye, right? And they think it's some kind of heebie-jeebie thing, that somebody will sell you a protection against, in the shuk for 10 shekel or something, and it's some kind of curse or voodoo, etc. But Moshe Shapiro Zatzal explained it in a very interesting way. He said, we see in Chazal that this concept of both ayin ra'ah and ayin tova have power. What are the roots of it? In Bereshit, in the creation of the world, there's a summary pasuk where it says, Vayar Hashem es kol asher asa v'hinei tov ma'od. Hashem saw everything he made, and behold, it was very good. So we think that that's like, a person who was working, he had a big job, and finally he finishes, he leans back in his chair, pops a beer, and he looks and says, it's good, I like it. The Torah isn't telling us something like that, it doesn't make sense. The v'hinei means something was actualized. Hashem saw what he did, and that made it good. There's a way of seeing something is a creative process. Why? Rabbi Shapiro explained like this. If I turn my back right now, in a certain way you don't exist. You're not in the field of my eyesight. As I turn, you come into existence. At that moment, there are two pathways available to me. I can look at everyone here and say, these people are too good looking, too wealthy, too smart, too holy, and have this desire that you should be minimized. That's what's called ayin ra'ah. The ayin tova is seeing all the good that's in people and wanting and imagining, hoping for more. It's like being a connoisseur of someone else having good things and doing good and being good. That's the midah of ayin tova. So the person can actually be happy in that way. So now that Rachel has had this, and she expresses this, to be able to do it with happiness in order to help, to be able to think of others, not just herself. Okay, again, when people read the psukim superficially, it looks like everybody here is on a trip about me. In fact, it's the opposite. I'll just tell you a very cute perush on the psukim of Yaakov Avinu and the stones in the beginning of the Parsha. Right? It says that Yaakov Avinu lay down to sleep at night. He put these stones around his head. First, they're referred to as me'avnei hamakom, plural stones. And then it talks about ha'even asher samei rashotav, the stone that he put under his head. Chazal said that this was a result of the yearning of all the stones who were all crying out, Alay yaniach tzadik et rosho. The tzaddik should put his head on me. Right? The Mesilas Yesharim brings this as an example. He says that the entire Bria, the entire creation, is really crying out to be used righteously by a righteous person. That's what's being evidenced there. So, the Imre Emes, the Ger Rebbe, pre-war Europe, who managed to escape to Eretz Yisrael for a bit, he asked the question, he said, once a miracle was happening, why couldn't it turn into a pillow? once there's a miracle, why does Yaakov have to sleep on a rock, right? Why can't we fluff it up a bit? So he answered, he said, because the miracle was in response to the cry of the stones. Each stone just was saying, Alai, I want the tzaddik to be on me. It wasn't the care about the comfort of the tzaddik. It's the care about me and my honor. He says it's something to think about. And that's a lot to do with this idea of Ayin Tova and Ayin Ra. Okay, so this is the heritage of Naftali. This description and name which Rachel gave him gave Naftali his properties. Now, we find descriptions of the Shvatim at the end of Breshit in the brachos that Yaakov Avinu gives the Shvatim, and in Rizos HaBracha in the brachos that Moshe Rabbeinu gives. And there we find Naftali described in fascinating ways. On one hand, we know the sign of Naftali, the animal that he's compared to is the deer. Naftali ayala shlucha. He is the swift-running deer. We know also that Naftali is described as seva ratzon. Naftali seva ratzon. He is satisfied with desire. It's a very strange phrase. It's a strange phrase because, and this was one time I asked Rav Moshe Shapiro a question. I was always very hesitant to ask a question in Shir because he did not suffer fools, as they say. And so I exercised my judgment. But here I said, isn't this a contradiction? If someone is saveya, if someone is satisfied, that means they no longer have ratzon. If someone has ratzon, then they're not satisfied. That simply seems to be the equation. So he answered me very, very cutely. He says, you don't understand satisfaction. You don't understand saveya. You think that it means that it's Shabbos afternoon after the chont and all your kids are married. It's such an interesting picture. Like, sitting around the table with a tummy full of chont, and you have a set of all the wedding pictures up there. He said, that's not Svia. He says, Svia is particularly satisfaction from having ratzon, from yearning, from wanting. That itself is the condition that we're supposed to have, that we're supposed to be in. It's a sign that we're alive. It's a sign that we're connected. It parallels what happens in terms of physical satisfaction and desire as well. Hunger is a sign of health. They tell a story about the Rebbe Zusha, that a man came to ask him for a bracha. And he spoke with Reb Zusha, and he got his bracha, and he left the house, and Reb Zusha called out to his wife. He says, bring me my shtreimel. She says, why do you want your shtreimel? It's a Tuesday afternoon. He says, I'm making a yontif. She says, why? He says, you saw that man who just came into the house? He said, yeah, he asked me for a bracha. You know what for? He's been suffering from a problem that he has no appetite. He says, so he's saved up money. He's going to Vienna to famous doctors to try and treat him in order to have appetite. She says, so? So he said in Yiddish, he said, Zusha hat appetit. Zusha has appetite. Do you realize how much that's worth? This guy's spending thousands of rubles. Zusha didn't have food. That was a separate problem, but he had appetite. Okay, so appetite is this idea of health, of healthiness. And therefore, in Ruchnius here, also, the idea of being svaratzon, a person who is satisfied with their desire, meaning I am part of this process. I am connected to something. And Judaism has this plus and minus, that it's infinite. And that's a plus because you're connecting with the infinite. It's a minus because there's always more to do. And you're never done, right? And that can make one uncomfortable, right? Because you feel that whatever I do is not enough. It's not enough qualitatively. It's not enough quantitatively. And this pressures us, right? I once mentioned, I flashed back to when I lived in Brooklyn. So there were some times when I would go to this bakery in Borough Park. I don't know if they still have the same staff. In those days, there was a certain nation of the bakery ladies of Borough Park. They all had this kind of Hungarian accent. And I used to get very pressured because when you would order something, you'd walk in, you'd say, I'd like one medium egg challah. She would kind of slap it on the table and say, vad else? And I would be flustered, I have to get a chocolate babka. Vad else? And I just felt that I wasn't doing enough. I had to do more. What should I get in order for her to feel? And I feel that Judaism sometimes does that to people. It's always vad else, right? Yeah. No, I got up for shul this morning. Vad else? It's always there, pressuring. So the joyous running of Naftali is the symbol of this. As Moshe pointed out, Naftali is the last of the Shvatim to travel in the desert. Meaning Naftali, right? Machane Dan is the last camp. The last Shevet Machane Dan that travels is Naftali. So Naftali runs, and he runs fast. He's the Ayala Shlucha, but he's always in last place. It's not like his running gets him forward, and yet he's able to run with joy, because only one who has that joy is really able to run in that way. Earlier in the Parsha, we find it says, Vayeitzei Yaakov Raglov. Rashi brings down, he says, Nosa libo es Raglov. What does it mean? Yaakov picked up his feet. It means that his heart, when he heard HaKadosh Baruch Hu promising him protection in his journey, his heart was full of joy, and that lifted up his feet. So too, the running, the zrizut, the Sfas Emes says that this can only be in a person that's in a state of simcha. He says, Ikra zrizus, the main basis of being energetic bal yadei simcha, comes through the simcha shadam zocher kama ma'asav magiim ad l'shamayim. That a person remembers how important each action he has, each action he does, and how it affects everything in the heavens. Va'emes, he says, in truth, hachna hoitzalazeh. Strangely, he says, what gives a person the ability to experience this joy and this energy is a sense of humility and submission. That would seem to be the opposite, because if I'm humble and submissive, I say, okay, what did I do? How much could I have done? How much could I have affected? He said, no. Al yedei sh'adam mevin shemeruchak hu min ha'emet, as much as a person is real with themselves, they say, I'm very far from the truth of who I am, of how I should live, of what the world is about. Nonetheless, as far as I am, as false as I am, the moment that I want to be close to Hashem and to do something that will change the world, I can do that. And that gives the person the strength to do it. So the one who feels he's arrogant and he feels, yeah, me and God are like this, and then he decides to do a mitzvah, he feels, yeah, I'm going to do God a favor today, right? He was good to me, my stock portfolio went up, right? So I'm going to do one. That person can't have the energy and joy of someone who feels, I am so far, and yet look what I'm able to do. Look how close I'm able to be. Look what I'm able to accomplish. Even though there will always be more to do. That's Naftali Svaratzon. Now the Baal HaTurim points out a fascinating Rashi Tevot, a fascinating acronym. Are people hot, by the way? Should we put on the air conditioning? Oh, maybe. Okay, so I don't know, it's always with me. Right, so Naftali Svaratzon, the Rashi Tevot, the first letters of that phrase is Nesher. It spells out the eagle. It spells out the eagle. Now, the combination of the two is very important. There is a Rav in America named Rav Shlomo Carlebach, Shlita, cousin of the famous singer, and he has a very beautiful sefer called Maskil Shlomo, which speaks about the Shvatim, and he explained the following connection between the deer and the eagle, that both are embodied in Naftali. He said, on one hand, we know that there are the four animals in Pirkei Avot, the four animals that we're supposed to emulate in serving Hashem. Az kanamer, bold as a leopard. Ratz katzvi, run fast as the deer. Gibor ka'ari, mighty as the lion. The kal kanesher, and light or swift as the eagle. So he said, aren't the two kind of redundant, the deer and the eagle? Deer's fast, eagle's fast, right? It's telling you, go fast. He says there's a big difference between the two. The beauty of the speed of the deer is that the deer is running quickly in this world of tremendous obstacles. A deer is not running on a nice little running track outside the local high school. The deer is running over terrain with branches and rocks and dips and hills and all these things and running fast. The speed of the nesher is because the nesher is above everything which is down here. There are no obstacles to the nesher. And the nesher therefore can fly swiftly. Naftali embodies this aspect of our DNA that we have to understand that we combine the two. On one hand, we're here in this world, and we're running as fast as we can over the obstacles that are here, hopefully with a sense of joy with what we can accomplish. But also understanding that part of our essence is not bound and limited by what we see here in this world. That there's a part of us that is far above this. And as long as we maintain the connection to that part, so therefore we're connected to something infinite. We're connected to something so much bigger to ourselves. And that connection to the Nesher up there enables the deer aspect of us to run so quickly down here. That's a key to remember as we go through life. To have that sense that the two are there and they unite in one. Mesilas Yesharim, in the beginning of the first parak, starts off with a paragraph that everybody likes. It says that we have to understand Shadam lo nivra ela litaneg al Hashem, that a human being was created to have pleasure from their connection to Hashem, not miziv shchinato, to have benefit from the shine of His presence. So everybody's into that. That sounds great. But then in the next paragraph he says, Vine be'emet, but in truth, the place for that is called Olam Haba, because only that is designed in the way that you can experience it. So everybody gets very disappointed. I always compare it to a kid who, when you go in the supermarket and you see the cereal that has an ad that there's a toy inside, so you nudge your mother to get that cereal so you can get the toy. Next morning you get up and you stick your hand in the cereal box trying to find the toy. If you can't find the toy, you dump the cereal on the table, and your mother comes down, a pile of cereal, you're looking upset. She says, it says you get this glow-in-the-dark spinning top, and it's not in here. So she shows you on the back of the box, it says, really, you have to send 3 proof of purchase seals and $7.50 to Battle Creek, Michigan, delivery within 3 months. And that's very disappointing, right? So in the same thing here, you tell us this, you were created for this wonderful joy, this wonderful pleasure of connecting to Hashem. Read the asterisk, available after death. Oh, thanks. That's really good. Right? So it's not coming to tell us that does not affect our lives in this world. What Naftali understands is that becoming part of something, which is true, is so great that to truly experience the magnitude of what you've done, it has to be in a different universe. But the joy of being part of that you can experience here. The Talmud Rebbe had asked, when Rachel said, Naftuli Elokim niftalti machoti gam yacholti, she said, I became shava to my sister. I'm now equal to my sister. Really? Your sister had 4 children from Yaakov. Here, this is the second child that was given birth to by your maidservant who married Yaakov. You're shava? You're equal to your sister? But when you're joined together in one endeavor, when you touch eternity, whether you're touching it this way or touching it that way, when you're connected, so then you're shaveh, because you're all part of that same system, that same endeavor. The one who does more and the one who does less, it's something which unifies, and Naftali is a unifying Shevet. Another thing they said about the rocks, right? It said, right, the rocks were arguing, each one wanted Allah yaniach tzadik et rosho, a miracle happened. The rocks all turned into one rock, but still, one rock had to be that part of the rock that was right under Yaakov's head. One rock was probably on the bottom, one rock was on the right side. The answer is that when there's achdut, when there's oneness, that doesn't matter anymore. Then there's not squabbling. Then the tzaddik's head is on all of us. It doesn't matter. If we are connected and unified in this endeavor, so then that's what can be. So Naftali's running, the idea of the connecting with the eagle and the deer, means that I can run with joy in this world, even if I'm last, and even if I'm not fulfilling everything, because I can always connect with eternity in each thing I do. And each thing I do, no matter how small it is part of that wonderful endeavor, part of that eternal endeavor. And this is how a person's supposed to go with joy. We find other aspects of it in Naftali. The city in the area of Naftali is Tiberia, which Chazal said stands for Tov Ayin, Tov Ro'i, seeing things in a good way. Another city in Naftali The Gemara in Megillah speaks about a city called Rakat. Why was it called Rakat? It says, Sha'afilu rekanim shaba, even the empty ones in that city were maleim mitzvot karimon, that they were full of mitzvahs like a pomegranate. So the Turi Even asks on that, he says, why would Chazal say it specifically about that city? That's a description that describes all Jews. It's said in other places in the Gemara about all Jews. He said it must be that the Shevet of Naftali were particularly special in that, meaning being able to recognize that even a person that may seem empty on the outside is really full of mitzvot karimon. Because Naftali understands even a small connection that a person has is really full and is connected to an entire world that can be there and that can fulfill. The land of Naftali had a very strange blessing. When it says Naftali ayala shlucha, that Naftali is the swift-running deer, where do we see it? How do you see it in the descendants of Naftali? So Chazal said, these are the perot ginosar. These are the fruits of ginosar that ripen quicker than any other fruits in Israel and are better than any other fruits in Israel. Ginosar is the region around the Kinneret. Chazal even asked the question, they say, why is it that perot ginosar don't grow in Yerushalayim? Meaning, if the land is reflecting the spiritual powers inside the land, and if Yerushalayim is the most spiritually packed part of Eretz Yisrael, shouldn't those wonderful fruits of Ginosar grow in Yerushalayim? And they said, because Hashem didn't want people to make Aliyah V'Regel just in order to eat the fruit. Right? So those fruit are up there in Tveria. When you come to Yerushalayim, you're coming for the Beis Hamikdash and for those things. Now, it describes that those fruits have very powerful effects on people. The Gemara in Brachos says that the Talmidim of Rabbi Yochanan would go on a proactive tiyul to eat the fruits of Ginosar at times. The Ben Ish Chai actually answered this in a tshuva to a Jew from Iraq who had moved to Israel, and he asked, he said, there's a place not far from me when in the harvest season they have delicious fruit, and I was thinking to take a vacation there to go eat fruit. He said, I wanted to ask, I know it's kosher fruit, but al pi midat chasidut, really in terms of righteousness, is that a righteous thing to do? So he said, I'll bring you a proof that it is. Because it says that Rabbi Yochanan and his Talmidim would go to eat the fruits of Ginosar. Through eating the fruits of Eretz Yisrael, you can connect to the land, you can draw the Kedusha of the land inside of yourself. But particularly those fruits. And it described the effects it had on Rabbi Yochanan's Talmidim. One of the strangest is that one of the Chachamim had said he would become so happy that a fly could not stick to his face. That seems strange. I guess I'm a practical-minded person. I think if you're eating a lot of fruit, your face gets sticky, and the flies would probably view it as an amusement park. Why would it be that your happiness after eating those fruits? So it has a little bit to do with flies. Okay, we'll speak about flies other times in the year also. Flies are fascinating creatures. And this again I heard from Rav Shapira. Right, flies are attracted to death. Right? It's a pasuk in Tanakh that speaks about zuvei mavet, meaning if you deal with smells in the world, okay, there are two types of basic smells. There are good smells in the natural world. Usually something that smells good is healthy, whole, alive. Something that smells bad is usually dead and decaying. Right? That's what you do when you go in the fridge and there's a Tupperware. You want to see, is it alive, safe, or is it, gone to the other side? What's fascinating is that the organ in our body which detects this is the nose. In the description of the creation of man and Bereshit, it says, "Vayipach ba'apav nishna asur achayim." HaKadosh Baruch Hu blew into the nostrils the breath of life, meaning that the sensor of life is where life entered us. That's what our nose is. It's this sensor of life. Now, a fly, if you have like a nice fresh apple on the table, a fly is not interested. If you have some nice rotting thing, flies are all over. The word zvuv is connected to the word zav, which means the flow of blood. If there's an open wound, if you've been on a farm, you see if a cow has a cut or something like that, flies are all over it. They're attracted to that which is dead, which is decaying, which has lost its connection to the source of life. There's two fascinating applications, one with the fly particularly. When someone's a burn victim, one of the most difficult things to do is to clean the injury, because you have to clean it in order for fresh skin to be able to grow, but the nerves are all exposed and raw, and it was always an incredibly painful thing to do. Someone discovered that if you take maggots, which are the baby flies, and they put them in a mesh bag so the patient doesn't see them, they will eat only dead skin cells, and they will not touch or harm any of the living cells in the womb. It's fascinating. To that extent, they're attracted to that. Now, someone asked me, well, what about the fish in those spas that the ladies go to that eat? Are those like, zvuv fish or something? I don't know. But this is what we have with the zvuv. So the idea of the zvuv not being able to stick to the face of the person who eats the fruits of ginosar, the idea that the fruits of ginosar get ripe quickly and are so sweet, means that the concept of tree and fruit represents our world and the results of our world. Naftali is the one who is able to live in this world with a living connection to that which is beyond this world, to the extent that it influences his joy in this world, even if he's not able to do everything, even if he's limited. And therefore, a fly cannot touch such a person, because such a person is full of life and full of joy and fully connected. And his connection is not disturbed by someone else doing something that he himself is not doing. He's not disturbed by the fact that he's unable to do some things that perhaps he would want to do. The question that many people argue about, I've seen both opinions, is there a concept of Ezu Asher Samech V'Chalko in spiritual things? Ezu Asher Samech V'Chalko, one of those questions that Chazal asked to get us thinking, Ezu Asher, who is rich? So we want to answer somebody with lots of money. How much money? $1 million? Is that really rich? Okay. $100 million. Really? But he can't buy his own island. He can't have his... okay, fine, $1 billion. Okay, $1 billion, but what if he has bad health? What if his wife hates him? What if... So eventually they want us to get to the idea that what I mean when I say rich is samech b'chalko, meaning he's happy. Wakes up in the morning and he's happy. He feels good. So we apply that to physical things. We say you should be happy with what you have. Right? You have a car, so don't sit there all day thinking, oh, I wish I had a Jaguar. You've got a Ford, it moves, be happy, enjoy it, right, etc. Does that apply to spiritual things as well? Most people's usual reaction is, of course not. Of course not. How are we going to progress? Right? If I learn 2 psukim of Chumash today, I say, wow, I'm really happy I learned 2 psukim of Chumash. When are you going to learn more Torah? Right? You have to say, no, 2 psukim, nothing. Right? More, what else? Exactly, right? And that's going to get it going. That is the fuel of greatness. That is what's going to happen. But in many sources, you find that this is not so. There's a famous letter from Menachem Mendel of Vitebsk, where he says you have to realize the damage that does. Because your neshama came into this world to have pleasure, to enjoy. HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't put us in here for torture. And if you unplug Judaism from being a source of pleasure, if that what else stops you from being able to enjoy anything you do, and you're just going to go do something else. You're going to try to get your pleasure someplace else. But then the question is, how does one progress? So the two can live together. In order, if a person has an ayin tova, if a person has a good eye, and they're happy with other people doing things, even if it's more than them, even if it gets them to wish to do more. Remember, it did say Vatikanei Rachel ba'achotah. Rachel was jealous of her sister, but not the evil type of jealousy, but the jealousy of seeing something that you're yearning to do, that you would like to do as well, to be part of that. You can be aware that there's more things you would like to do, but you can still enjoy that which you have, and know that it brings HaKadosh Baruch Hu great pleasure, and to know that it's very significant. Right, here's the image I give for it, right, with apologies to my wife. Let's say it's my wife's birthday and I want to buy her some jewelry. Okay, now the way jewelry works here, from my limited experience in stores, you buy some gold jewelry, they put it on a little scale, and then they tell you how much it costs. So I go into a jewelry store with my big eyes, and they have those different little headless heads there wearing the necklaces. I see a nice impressive gold necklace. How much is that one? Put it on the scale. 23,000 shekel. Interesting. Let's keep that one on the side for a second. I think I remember my wife's style is a little bit more subtle. Subtle is her thing. How much is that one? This one, 7,000 shekel. Good. But I don't know if it really matches her other things so much. Eventually I get down to something that's like dental floss made out of gold, that if you hold it up to the light, you can see it. And, they put it in a nice little box and a ribbon. So I can come home and say, hi, happy birthday, we don't have much money. Get a magnifying glass to see your present. Right? It could be one way. Or I can have joy in the fact that I'm able to get her something and to give it with joy, while still understanding that there are more beautiful necklaces in the world, while still wanting someday to be able to get her more beautiful necklaces in the world. But it doesn't mean that I can't have joy with what I have right then. That was Rachel. She wanted more. You see from her name for Yosef, Yosef Hashem li ben Acher. Nonetheless, she was able to have joy in the birth of Naftali, and even that side contribution, so to speak, to the building the nation of Yaakov. And that is one of the major challenges in our life. I'll finish with the following image and idea. We ran a drop more, but now the stories are coming, so people will be okay. Revolva asked kind of a painful question. Looking at the general graph of how people grow up in life, little baby, pretty helpless, doesn't know much, can't do much. Grows up some more, 5 years old, has learned more about life, can do more, 18 years old, more, 20, 30, more life experience, more skills, more connections, more physical strength, and you're going and you're building on what you've done each year. At some point in life, in most cases, it starts to go the other way. Physical strength decreases. Mental acuity also. Ability to get about and to do things often shrinks. And you say, why would Hashem do that? Wouldn't it make sense that we can keep building on everything we've done so that then at the end we can really do the most that we could possibly do in our life based on all of it and all of our potential? Revolba answered, that's exactly what's happening. That's exactly what's happening. All of that preparation there is the preparation for how you will live if you become limited again. If you are not able to do what you used to do, if you are not able to do what you wanted to do, to be able to say, this is what I'm able to do, and to do it with joy. Because if this is what I'm able to do now, that's my contribution, that's my part of this endeavor. And there's no reason I should have less joy in this than in doing more. So one story in this I saw myself. Years ago, I was in the fine city of Cleveland for some reason, right? Just like you guys were. Okay, so, and I ended up davening Shachris in the Telz Yeshiva. And I came very early, not because I'm a tzaddik, but because I had insomnia, and I didn't know what time davening was also, so I got there really early. At that point, the Rosh Yeshiva of Telz of Gifter Zatzal, he was very elderly. He had a room in the yeshiva. So I was sitting in the beis medrash, trying to learn some Gemara. He walked in. So I jumped up, and he put his hand on my shoulder, pushing me down. He looked over my shoulder. He says, you're learning Gemara. He says, I can no longer learn Gemara, but I'm going to learn Chumash. And he went off and he took out a Chumash. Now, Rav Gifter was one of the greatest minds in the world of Gemara study, in all areas of Shas. He was no longer able to do it. But he said that very calmly, and he took his Chumash with joy. It was a tremendous example. Rav Fyvel Shuster tells about somebody named Rav Yaffe, who was a student of Rav Aaron Kotler, and Rav Aaron Kotler told him you should devote your life to education. And he taught older students very advanced material. Toward the end of his life, he opened up a daycare center, like a little pre-kindergarten. And someone asked him, hey, why are you doing this? He says, my Rebbe told me I should devote my life to the education of Jewish children. I used to do it with the older ones. I can't do that anymore, but I can still do some with the younger ones. So this is the picture of Naftali Svaratzon. You're filled with desire. Where you'll be able to apply your desire depends on many things. Depends on the circumstances. It depends on your abilities. But the very fact that you have desire, like Reb Zusha having appetite, And if you have the opportunity to apply that desire to something in some way, that's our way of doing the joyous running of Naftali. It's the way of joining the difficulties that we have to run through in this world with the connection to that heavens of the eagle that's flying there, that's part of us as well. And with that, we continue in his footsteps. With that donation that he gave, that's that Naftali chromosome that's there in all of us. We just have to deliver it in order to run through life with joy.